During the war, I got nearly died several times. When we were out in Malta, I nearly died several times. But the first thing, just getting to Malta, we had a new aircraft we took from pick up from England and went down, and we had to fly over Spain, and then we stopped at landed in Gibraltar. We took off there at dusk, and we had all we had on board to navigate it was our radio and a drift sight. There was supposed to be the drift sight sort of gives you an opportunity of testing how strong the wind was, because when your aeroplane's pointing this way and you're going that way, the drift sight gives you an idea of what, if you want to stay on track, you've got to go this way a bit more to crab along. So those are the only tools we had. And when we got over the Sahara Desert, we were sent on a long route because the aircraft was a secret aircraft, was latest radar airborne era, and we were sent over a long route there to Malta, where we had to go down over, and because if anything happened to us, they didn't want us to fall into enemy hands, which almost turned out to be a joke. But anyway, we hadn't gone very far, and it was covered with cloud, so we never saw the ground to get a drift sight. And so we thought, well, we'll just have to go to Malta and work out. We knew we had our maps here and everything, and we worked it out. And when we got we'd call them up on the radio and get any help we needed. And when we came to use the radio was no good. It just didn't work at all. So we were left airborne over the Mediterranean, not knowing where we were, without any aids, and not knowing where we were supposed to be going, whether we're north, south, east, or west. And we finished up being in the air in the end for 8 3/4 hours as a Beaufighter, and I had to make a decision of what we'd do, because all we wanted to do. It's hard to explain to anyone that's been in the situation, but 8 3/4 hours we agonised over the water, knowing that we were probably going to have a watery grave and no one would ever know what had happened to us. And if you don't know what tension is, that's it. And so I decided I'd fly northwest, because all we wanted to do was find some land that we could land on, and we didn't know. We didn't care whose land it was, whether it was German land, French land, Cyprus, or Italy, or where because we had absolutely no idea where we. It turned out the wind was afterwards. The wind was blowing about twice as strong as what we were given. And anyway, just at the end of our 8 3/4 hours, when we were running out of petrol, we struck land, and so we didn't even know what country it was. So having found land, I flew in a little bit to get away from the coast where all the action was going on. The Germans and the Italians were all retreating then, and so I flew out far enough so that we'd be in the Sahara Desert far enough to work our way. We'd try and walk back to if we got down. So I got down and the engines were coughing, and I turned my landing light on, and I found the dunes were going this way though, so I didn't want to fly across them. So I just had enough petrol they kept going long enough with my light on to find I could land in between the dunes. And so I went down and I did the best landing that I've ever done in my whole life. I never want to, but we didn't put my wheels down. We just landed in the sand, and we knew we were behind enemy lines there. We were quite certain we would be behind the enemy lines. We decided we first of all, we knew this aircraft was one that had information on it that the Germans would have had, although at the time the Germans were just busy trying to get out of the way. The Rommel was, and all the Italians on the main had packed it in anyway, but they were all fleeing into Tunisia, and So we landed safety, but we found out quick enough. What my Bill took my revolver and ran over towards where all the seals that kept track, and he found the sign Zuara on it, and that's where we were, Zuara in Trinidad. That's the name of the town. So we knew where the enemy was. We saw all the enemy thing. He came back again, and we had to set fire to the aircraft, and which just sounds easy, but the wind was blowing a fair bit, and I took the top off both of the petrol tanks, and I threw a match in, and I just went whoosh, no fire. So I tried the other one, did the same, no fire. They only had gas left in them. And so then all I could do, I went and got the Very pistol, and I fired the Very pistol, which had the colours of the day, fired that into both the tanks, and we set fire to it a bit. And we left there to go inland enough to walk back to where we knew Tripoli had been taken, and we were probably only about 60 miles from there if all went well. And when the second day, two Arabs decided to follow us, and we thought a bit peculiar. One of them was dressed like Lawrence of Arabia on a white horse with a sword, and the other bloke had a gun, walked with a gun, and they obviously became quite obstreperous, and they looked as if they were going to try and knock us off, which they tried to. And the bloke used to get down on his knee and aim the rock, and we'd zigzag and that, and until we walked as long as we could, thinking we could shake them off or anything, but no chance of doing that. And we finished up. I couldn't walk one other yard in the sand, and I had a great coat on. I had everything, and so I had my pocket full of black and white cigarettes we'd bought free of in Gibraltar. So I thought before I actually busted my ball and decided I was going to have to set up and have a battle, that I threw these cigarettes away, and we went on, and the bloke with the gun, he dived behind I've never thought about it anymore, but I thought they might slow them up or something if someone. I didn't have the time to see the bloke on the horse again, and so I got down, and Muhammad Ali Ben Gassi, his name was, and I found out very well, and we tried to kill each other, and I had my revolver, and I fired 4 shots at him. And every time his head came up, I got the sand right just where top of his head was, and the sand would go up, and I think I might have got him, and he overcome his head again, and that happened 4 times. And just after the 4th time, I looked up, and there's this bloke on the horse riding around, and he came galloping up towards us, waving his arms and everything, and put his sword away, and he was going Sunusi Inglesi, and they thought we were Germans, and when they found they were English, they were friendly. So that was and if I had killed him, we didn't know. We only had the 2 of them we thought we were fighting, and the four more Arab heads popped up over the nearest sandbank. And they were watching what was going on, and we would have been dead. So that was pretty scary. And my observer, I don't think he ever got out of the aircraft, which was really sad. But I couldn't speak for him, because if he didn't get out, he was probably suffering from the same problem that I was. The high G in the aircraft was just jammed you to get a thing, and you couldn't move hardly. That was so strong. So I just think he may have, but he's a fine man too. So I lost him, and I hadn't had my 21st birthday then. I think I just had it in Malta, and I wrote this letter to his parents, but they never answered me. I had two or three that I could quite easily have been dead, and they picked me up at the hospital ship in the end, and there's two Australian nurses on board, and they made a fuss on me, cleaned me all up, put me into bed, and then that night they brought in about 6 sailors that had been on a ship that had been sunk, and they'd been blown up in a magazine or something, and they brought them all in, and they rustled. They were just all covered like brown paper, like black paper, and they rustled. They were all burnt, 100% burned, and 2 or 3 of them were still alive. And I got out of bed. I couldn't bear it, and they all died during the night. Anyway, I saw all the wounded coming on board, and I found a lump of the German aircraft stuck in my leg, and I got one of the doctors to take that out, and I watched him doing it, and I'd had injections galore, but I watched him doing it. I stuck the needle in, and I just went, picked me up off the floor, and I said, God, I hardly felt the prick. I don't know why. He said, oh boy, that's what happens to you when you got shock. The Battle of Sicily was on, invasion of Sicily, and we were flying at night, and one night we got up there. We'd already been shooting at trains and one thing and another, but we got up that night, and we got in a stream of bombers that were dropping bombs on Sicily, and some of them were landing in the sea, and we noticed the hospital ship down there was across, all lit up like, and it didn't take much notice of it at the time. It was just something we took notice of, and then we got behind the Junkers 88, and we got and I fired at him, and the first of our cannon shells hit a bomb or they were dropping landmines as well, dropping a bomb or a mine on board, and the whole world blew up. The enemy aircraft just vanished in dust, and we were in a ball of fire that just, as far as we were right in the middle of it, and our aircraft was all badly damaged, and we knew that. But I stayed just long enough to try and see if I could make it fly, and found nothing worked, and then I decided that I better open my hatch so we could bail out, and my observer in a Beaufighter sat in a seat further back in the aircraft, and he was singing out, bail out, and then the next thing he called me, he said, I can't find the handle of my escape hatch. So I said to him, well, you better come and jump out of mine. Well, that was the best advice I could give him under the circumstances, but mine was open, and I was trying to get out of it myself. And in a Beaufighter, you put your hands up, and your parachute and your legs are sitting in the seat, and you've got to lift your bum out of the seat and drop through this hole behind you. Well, I started to take my hands off it, and it went into a spin, and the G forces were so strong I could feel that I wasn't going to be able, and I couldn't lift my bum out of the seat, and I feel my hands being torn off, and I knew at an instant when all this was going on, I thought, well, you thought you were going to die sometime or other, and this is it. And everything sort of went quiet, and that's the last I remember, when my hands were torn off, and that was the end of my life. Except that the weight of the top half of my body was heavy enough to tip over and bring my bum out, and I hit my head and everything, and broke my nose, and God knows what, and blood was everywhere. And I went out, and the next time I came to, I was floating in the air, so I found out, put down to see if the parachute was there, and pulled the parachute, and I just got opened, and I landed in the water about the same time as our aircraft. So I don't know how long I floated with it before, but if I had been any longer, I would have just hit the water. So that was, I could call that a fairly shaky do. the big day came, and I mean, it's really hard to tell you what it looked like. It was sort of just absolutely out of this world. The aircraft that were flying over towards Normandy, pulling gliders and all that thing. So many, the air was just covered in it. It was like a couple of thousand Domhnall raids nearly with numbers. And the noise of the engines of all the aircraft was, you could feel it vibrating, almost. I said in one of my stages that I could feel it for your feet. It was almost made the ground was just huge, what 1 or 2 aeroplanes like, but when there's thousands of them over all going, and a lot of them were old type aircraft, pulling gliders and that, Whitleys and things like that. Anything that would fly could fly a glider. That was it. So they went over, and on the sea, you could look out to sea and just see ships everywhere, because we weren't involved at that stage until the night time comes, because our job was at night. So we saw all the day preparations and all the aircraft blokes going over there, and we knew all about the weather changing, and some of the waterborne troops had to stay in their ships, being seasick nearly, and in the colder night because the weather was too bad, and they went on some of them were going to go on the June the 5th, I think, and they had to change for weather. So just seeing the build-up of it all was just absolutely fantastic. And then we were flying at night, and the first night of D-Day, one of our members shot down, two of them shot down big German bombers in the first night of D-Day. So that was the start of it, and then most of us were very successful. We were just luckier than some. And Bill and I, over a period of about 17 days or 15 days or something, we shot down 4 German bombers over Normandy. People have said to me, what was it like sort of killing people? Well, that's what we had to do. That's what it was all about. That's what war is so bloody horrible. But and I always think, when we were flying over there at night at Normandy, looking down, and there'd be a lot of flashes and bomb flashes and gun flashes and everything. It was like a bit of lit up all along the coast there, and inland towards Cairn and everything. And we looked down, and we used to think just, Jesus, we're lucky being up here. There, sort of thinking of the blokes down there. I really seriously thought about it. But the end of it all is, with all those people being killed and everything else, you just got to stop and think, we won the war, and thank God we did, because what the world would have been like now if we hadn't, God knows, with Hitler and the Japanese and even the Russians were hopeless. Like they were supposed to be our allies, but they helped us, I think, in the long run. But old Joe, we used to call him Old Joe. The Russians killed 22 million of their own people, apart from the war. So I mean, we were living with monsters around the world at that time, and. So I always just console myself that it's good we won. I think at the end of my training, when I got before I got my wings, I thought I was God's gift to aviation. We got so confident in them, and we used to go up and do silly things on them. And then I saw one of the blokes getting killed one day, and that's made me realise that perhaps I'd better be a bit more sensible and not do things that we were doing. And but I think the whole war is a bit like that. If you see things happen, each one you try and learn a lesson from it for yourself. So I got my pilot officer training when I got my wings, and got on the boat to go to England.